Hello, everyone. This is Lindsay Wallace with the National Main Street Center. We'll get started in just a couple of minutes, but I wanted to get the slides started so everybody knows where they are. But I'll go ahead and start right on the dot at 1. If anybody is having any issues hearing me, please feel free to enter a message into the chat box. But hopefully you can hear me okay. But again, we'll go ahead and get started right at 1. All right. Hello, everyone. It's right at 1, and I'm going to go ahead and get started just to make sure we maximize the time here. My name is Lindsay Wallace. I'm the Senior Manager of Special Projects with the National Main Street Center. I'm thrilled to have all of you on the line here to talk about our new design-focused services. Just a couple of housekeeping things here. This is recorded, so if you know of anybody who wanted to make it but couldn't make it today, we'll have the link. We'll probably send it out in our Main Street News, which goes out Thursday or Friday. So you'll have the link there, and you'll see my contact information at the end of this slideshow. So if you have any questions about the recording or anything else you want to talk about, you can feel free to reach out to me via my email. Also, if, as we're talking here, there's going to be plenty of time at the end for Q&A. So if you have questions during the presentation, you can go ahead and put them in the chat box. I'll wait till the end to take questions, but you can feel free to enter them in there as I'm talking here. And I'll do my best to navigate the system to find the questions to respond. So great. Well, thanks again for taking the time today. I wanted to just do a preview of some of the things we've been thinking about here at the center and some initial new design services we are excited to share with you. Sometimes the system takes a second with the slide advancement, so bear with me on that. Get that going. There we go. So kicking it out with the agenda here, this will be a 60-minute webinar. I'll probably talk for about 40 minutes, leaving some time at the end for Q&A. I want to give you a little bit of a background for how we got to where we are, and one of the things we've kind of decided to start with design services. Give you an overview of the actual nuts and bolts of what the services are and the costs associated with those. And then I'll dive into a preview of the topics that we're focused on for this first initial phase. Understanding, I want to put it out there to the network that I'm here on staff. I'm shifting over to field services, which you might have seen in our newsletters. So I'm available to talk about design-focused services or other services above and beyond anything we talk about today. So just think of me as another point person that you can contact directly. Even if it's not about these specific services, I'm another person to contact if you have questions, especially around design. So we'll cover the topics that we have these new focus services on, and then there'll be time for Q&A at the end. You might have seen this flyer at the conference if you were there, or in our communications. So you might have already read up a little bit on what we're talking about today. So I wanted to pull up this slide just because even though we're talking about design-focused services, we're really approaching design as this an element of a larger whole. We're not talking about design as a siloed point. We're talking about it as a part of this de-siloed process, this Main Street refresh, this Main Street approach that's really focused at all of these things coming together under one heading. So even though these services are focused on things that would traditionally be under that design umbrella, we're really in these services and all of our services looking at that as part of a greater whole and making those connections easier to see. So in terms of what we've been doing so far, you've probably seen this, and if you haven't and you don't know how to access this, please let me know because I want to make sure everybody gets access to this. But our initial kind of step into getting more design-focused services out from in-house was this update to our Main Street Approach Handbook on Design. So we put this out in 2018 thanks to the generous support of the 1772 Foundation. It's really an update of what we'd put out before in Revitalizing Main Street and a couple of our other really fantastic different design-focused handbooks that were out in the 90s and the 2000s. Pulling all of those together and adding new information about the expanded universe of what design on Main Street is and what we think it should be. So again, this is out. It's on our resource center on our website. And if you haven't had a chance to look at it or don't know where to find it, just feel free to reach out to me and I can send you on your way there. So along those lines, we worked on this handbook and really interested in seeing what we could offer to the network from our staff, right? We do have some folks on staff who have design expertise. I have a background in historic preservation and urban planning, and we have a few other folks on staff who have somewhat similar backgrounds. And so we thought, we want to look at what we can offer with regard to design, knowing that there are a lot of experts in our network, luckily, a lot of really great services and people that are already offering these things. So is there something we can offer as a supplement? Anything that we looked at, we don't want to duplicate really good services that are already out there. We want to fill gaps and we want to supplement and partner with folks that are already doing really great stuff. So in this process, starting, it's been a while, I think, since I started, but thinking about this first phase of what we're really trying to focus and offer, we did an assessment of what we've put out before. I did interviews with about 10 coordinators and want to continue those interviews with folks who offer design services, who don't offer design services, but want to see what they could offer to their communities from other folks. Just getting an assessment of what's out there and what we can partner on, what gaps we could fill. So for this first phase that we're going to talk about today, we focused our efforts in developing a couple of new design-focused topical webinars and workshops around 4 themes, which we'll get into. So those seem to be the themes that both we've done a lot of work on in-house through different projects and then that kind of thing that we have to offer, and at the national level that maybe we're uniquely positioned to offer through these specific themes. So through the fall of 2019, we're going to be launching these new webinars and workshops associated with those themes. But again, I'm 50% on field services team now, yay! So I'm around to talk through if you have questions about other kinds of services you're interested in. So as we're launching these, we're really looking too at evaluation of the new services. Are they working? Are people wanting these? Are these, what we're best positioned to offer? And looking at course corrections and or expansions. So some of the things we talked about in the interviews that I've had with different people in the network is, things that I hadn't really considered, that, National Main Street Center might be the best place to perhaps have a directory of preservation services or other kinds of resources for all of our members rather than just through field services. So there's a couple of things as we're thinking about as we're delivering these services, evaluating, doing some R&D to make sure we're on the right track. So the idea would be that we're continuously growing the suite of design services and value add pieces for our network. So for this initial phase, again, these are our initial kind of focused technical services we'll talk about today. Our 75-minute technical services webinars focused on a variety of design-related topics. All of these webinar topics can be and have been adapted into half-day or one-day on-site community workshops. These topics, we have experience and learnings in different projects on these specific topics, which is why we're choosing them. But all of them, the idea would be that we want to adapt based on community need and interest. So there's a lot we can do with these different kinds of topics, both in the learnings that we already have and the ability to adapt to what folks might want on the ground. So for this initial phase, each webinar will come at a cost of $1,500, $1,500, which would include a pre-presentation calls to discuss adaptations, interests, needs under that specific theme to make sure that what you're getting is really going to have the maximum impact that you're looking for, on the ground. And since this is a new set of services, we're offering a discounted rate for bundling. So you can get 3 webinars for a discounted rate of $4,000 or the entire suite of 4 for $5,000. So just throwing that out there. But again, as we're launching these new design services, a lot of what we're looking at is what can we offer to membership that doesn't have a cost, looking at expanding that suite, especially for what our role could be at national. But for these first few services that we're going to talk about today, these are through our technical services arm, so there is a cost associated. In terms of rates for workshops, depending on half day and full day, we can talk more about those offline if that's of interest to you. But these are our basic costs we usually charge for webinars and workshops. So if you've used our technical services before, you're familiar, I'm sure. So again, I'm seeing some questions coming in. Thank you so much for putting those in there. I'll make sure to get to them once give you a little preview of our various topics. So please feel free to keep asking questions as I'm going through. So in this part, I really want to give you a preview of the kinds of things we'll talk about in each of those topics, each of the specific topics and themes that we're focused on for this initial phase. And again, these aren't exhaustive lists, and they can be adapted based on what your community need would be. So the first one, design nuts and bolts. So this is something that we've heard, there are a lot of different design 101 offerings in the network, and then there are a lot of gaps in certain states that maybe don't have this service. So we think at the national level, we can offer this looking at what is already out there, what kinds of things everybody's talking about, and really give a survey of Main Street design topics, so including the principles of quality district design, Preservation 101, history of downtown development and why it matters, and then tools, resources, incentives, getting to the real nuts and bolts there about who you should be talking to, what resources are out there, what kind of money is there to fund preservation projects and different kinds of built environment projects, exploring the role of Main Street leaders with district design. So really cracking it down to what's the number one kind of sets of things that a district leader should know about or be responsible for as a Main Street leader with regard to design on Main Street. And then the other piece is looking through practical first step design focused projects. We've heard that when I presented Design 101 a few times that, what's the next step? How can we get this rolling for Main Street leaders who maybe haven't done a design project before? What's a good first step? So that's a thing we can certainly build into this webinar and or workshop, looking at how to just get something started, get something launched on the ground. So I'm going to go through the next few slides kind of quickly just to give you a preview of the kinds of things we'd cover in this. So this is kind of the summary here, but just to give you a visual. And again, adaptation is something we're interested in as well. So thinking about the role of historic districts, what it means to have a historic district, if your district is one, if you wanted to get it listed, what does that mean? Really going through those kinds of designations. Facade glossaries is a pretty 101 piece, but an important thing for a Main Street manager to know the basics of or to have on deck to be able to guide their merchants through any kind of process with buildings, improvements, rehabs, etc. Storefront guidelines, similarly, this is a great thing for a Main Street leader to have in their back pocket, a basic understanding of storefront elements and how how to keep them fresh, how to keep them inviting, how to keep them appropriate for preservation treatments. And this Keeping Up Appearances right here is a really fantastic publication that Main Street put out, I want to say 1995, maybe earlier, but it's still really relevant. The drawings are great. Check that out. We have it linked on our website too, but it's a great resource for having storefront guidelines. Wayfinding, a huge, really important design element for any Main Street district, but can also be pretty daunting as a concept just because the price tag can get a little steep. So looking at ways to iterate, ways that don't cost tens of thousands of dollars, or building out, a tiered plan for how to get there, those bigger projects or bigger wayfinding initiatives. Alleys and rear entrances, so thinking about the importance of alleys and rear entrances as part of your built environment. Design, I think a lot of times we might just think about old buildings, which are important and we love them and they're important to our districts for a number of reasons. But what we want to look at with design nuts and bolts is all of the various physical pieces of your downtown district that can help support the other points in the Main Street approach, but also just your cultural sustainability, your economic development, all of that. So really capitalizing on built environment elements that can help support your greater goals. Public improvements, big deal, can be complicated, but looking at how to use opportunities to engage in public improvement processes and implementation, and how those can apply to your other goals as well, with relationship building, with the community engagement, all of those kinds of things tied to a design element. Streetscapes, another one, good opportunity for different kinds of relationship building and for some interesting design concepts and some transportation pieces, which are crucial to any kind of design-related project on Main Street. Maintenance repair, another kind of 101, but a really good thing for a Main Street leader to understand the basics of, so you can help your merchants understand how their buildings are functioning or why a leak might be happening and how they can take some simple steps to mitigate some of those issues before they become really big issues, really costly issues. So kind of helping a Main Street leader understand what their role would be in understanding maintenance and repair, basics of that. Looking at inappropriate alterations, so we know that a big issue in Main Street districts is understanding how to advocate for good design, for appropriate rehabilitation, for taming teardowns, for advocating for the built environment. So we'll look at inappropriate alterations. What does that mean? What are the common things that happen that are inappropriate that can easily be mitigated and advocated for appropriate alteration goals and implementation. Taming teardowns, again, looking at how community leaders can help encourage maintenance and can help merchants avoid a teardown, or to help the city avoid teardowns. So being all on the same team and building relationships to figure out how to mitigate some of this, both preemptively, which is ideal, and then during an actual fight. Compatible infill considerations, again, another thing in this same kind of vein, looking at when there is a missing tooth in your downtown facades. What can go in there? What should you advocate for? Who can you talk to get those conversations rolling? As a Main Street leader, this is a good opportunity to be an advocate for the built environment, to kind of understand what would make the most sense for infill. Zoning 101. So it wouldn't be a zoning heavy course, but really looking at what elements does a Main Street leader need to know, both in understanding zoning code, but how to be involved in conversations around zoning. So it's another thing to cover with this design nuts and bolts piece. Understanding the Secretary of the Interior standards and guidelines. These are the federal standards that people use to evaluate rehabilitation projects of historic buildings. So looking at kind of the nuts and bolts of that and really breaking it down to understand what these are. I think because they're federal guidelines, they can seem a little daunting, they can seem a little prescriptive, And it's not that they're not necessarily, but there's a way to break it down to make it a little easier to understand and to understand what their potential applications are. So going over that. Looking at the National Register of Historic Places. So getting back to the point about historic districts, really understanding what designation means, the protection of the investments, the incentives that become available, breaking it down to make it easy to understand. There's a lot of information in preservation and a lot of it seems very technical, but there are some basics that a Main Street leader can understand and be able to communicate that can kind of break down the barrier there to entry into preservation related issues. State Historic Preservation Offices, many of you are probably friends with them. It's a good thing to be friends with them. But looking at that relationship and what it means for Main Street leaders and design, kind of evaluating what they can offer and then how to best get in touch with them if you haven't already. CLG, a lot of you are CLGs. This is a big topic with Main Street leaders, understandably so. So breaking down a little bit around what this actually means. If you are a CLG and you wanted this service, we could break it down for folks who maybe don't know what that means for them. And if it's not a need, we don't need to have this as a part of it. So again, that adaptation. Looking at federal and state historic tax credits, so breaking that down can be hard to understand, of course. Many of you get it way more than a lot of other folks in the country, so bravo to that. It can be a complicated process, but understanding the importance and relevance to Main Street and design there. Again, preservation designations at the local, state, and federal level, understanding what each of those means on the ground and incentive-wise. So looking through some of those pieces. Financial pieces that can help fund preservation, both federal money, but other kinds of funding that are common and can help fund preservation efforts. Research resources, so one thing that could be a really strong role for a local Main Street leader is to help building owners understand how they can educate themselves about their property, understanding where to look for chains of title, for understanding about the use of the buildings, all those kinds of things, and how it fit into the development of your district. Main Street leader can be a good lead for interested parties in your community to understand how to do that research. And then, of course, when we're getting to the practical, how can we get started? This is just an example of one of those things, something simple, easy, something that a first-timer can get involved with prioritizing design needs, doing a physical audit, a database, and then building it out. So starting out with a database, but taking the next steps beyond that to build out over the course of a year or two, building out priorities connected to this kind of easy project. Just an example. So that's the first one, design nuts and bolts. And I know it was a quick run through, but wanted to give you an example of some of the things we could talk about. It could be all of them. It could be a big survey, or it could be focused themes on a few of those. But wanted to give you the full universe of possibilities. Excuse me for my. Should have said this off the top. I do have a bit of a cold, so I apologize that I sound kind of gross. But I wanted to make sure to stick with May 7th because I wanted to get this launched and to get the conversation moving. We'll get into the second topic here, trail-oriented development. So this one we have done, like Design Nuts and Bolts, we've done several webinars and workshops around this. And this is because this topic is seemingly of great interest. It seems like a big trend right now, looking at how to connect the benefits of trails and the actual physical trail to the downtown district. So maximizing the economic development potential of amenities, place-based amenities in your community. So with this webinar, we would look at the Trail Town model, history, methods, and practice. It's a really cool model that was actually developed based on the Main Street approach. So there's a lot of easy overlap there. And within that, looking at strategies to implement comprehensive trail-oriented initiatives using the approach, so tying those together. In the webinar and workshop, we can look at trail-oriented economic development research. There's a really wonderful library out of Headwaters Economics, which is I believe it's in Bozeman, but they're a think tank and they've pulled together a huge library of trail research and economic development connected to trails. So it's a good thing to pull into this discussion if you're working on relationship building or making the case to dive into any trail-oriented development work, to have some research behind that. And then looking at connecting your community and economic development efforts to trail and outdoor recreation amenities. So thinking about how to help your business owners capitalize on any trail visitation, trail-focused tourism, that kind of thing. Connecting your business owners, your community folks to potential tourism, or even local folks using the trails, making the connection for that. Local entrepreneurs that might want to be a part of, or take part in understanding the public amenities. And then looking at amenities available in your community, region, and state, and kind of doing a map around potential growth, potential regional marketing, that sort of thing. Just going through a few slides. So again, looking at the Trail Town model, this is a Trail Town guide. It's a really fantastic resource you can download. But in this webinar and this service, we'd really break it down and help you understand how it was developed, but then how the model connects to the Main Street approach. So thinking about Trail Town success, you see they break it down into 5 different pieces that really layer well into the work we already do. Trail Town design considerations, so really breaking down the elements and what each means to the success of the trail, but also to the commercial district and that connection. Again, looking at the research, so we did a workshop in Illinois, and we pulled in, relevant both state and regional reports that we could find that kind of helped make the case for why you might want to do this trail and development in your region. So this is just a map to show you one of the things that we did in this workshop was evaluate what kinds of trails were within certain radii of the Main Street office. So Carbondale's lucky. It's a beautiful place if you haven't been to this part of Illinois. It's a fantastic Main Street community, but just beautiful trails, all kinds of trails. But in this webinar and workshop, we really broke it down to what was this close, what was a little bit further out, looking at regional trails. So this was looking at all of the trails. It's a different mapping tool, looking at all of the trails within 90 miles, right? So if people are coming to do a big trail-focused tourist weekend or week or something, that you can look at what trails are around or near you, what communities, these are Main Street communities we mapped out, but potential like Main Street trail corridors or regional trail corridors, just really expanding that beyond just what you have locally into potentially a regional marketing opportunity. So part of this workshop is us really evaluating different mapping tools to show, what's around and what kind of relationships you can build based off these opportunities. Rails to Trails is another. So I pulled this one out. Again, this is a different mapping tool, but Rails to Trails is a great partner of ours, and part of what we want to do with our design services is be able to connect our network to partners that we work with, that if we don't have the expertise in one area, or if they offer expanded services or something, to be able to connect you with that. So Rails to Trails is one of our good partners, and this is if you had a next stage situation or wanted to do a longer workshop, we could have partners come in as well. So just thinking through that. So again, these are highlights. There's a lot more to what we could do with these, but in this preview webinar, I wanted to make sure we had enough time for questions. So just giving you an example of the different kinds of things we can pull into that webinar and workshop. It's a very cool topic, a lot to cover in that. Not only with the physical amenities, but with opportunities for relationship building, which are very cool. One question I did get before about trail-oriented development is, what about themed trails, walking trails, historic trails, and that kind of thing? And we can easily talk through that as well. This is a little bit different because we're talking about outdoor rec, but some of the principles are the same in terms of connecting the community to trail-based tourism to local entrepreneurship opportunities, et cetera, connected to these trails. So if that's of interest, we could talk more about that too offline, but it's something that connects well to this as well. Third topic, Main Street saves energy and money. So we did, and I'll tell you a little bit more about this in a upcoming slide, but a few years ago, we were subcontractors with the National Trust for Historic Preservation on a grant with the Department of Energy. It was a $3 million research and development grant for 3 years, looking at how to connect small businesses with energy incentives that could help business owners save money. So we were involved in that research and development project, and we had a few Main Street communities who worked with us on that. Thank you again if you're on the line. But we have some learning from that and some real pretty deep research around that we wanted to apply to technical services, because a lot of this stuff is easily achieved. It's just harder for small business owners, as many of you know, to take the time out of their day to understand this kind of thing. So it's about making connections and exploring tools to make that energy saving, money saving easier for small business owners. So in this suite, we would be looking at kind of a 101 around inherent energy efficiency of small commercial districts, so buildings, but also the walkability factor, density, that sort of thing, and how that helps achieve energy efficiency. Exploring what green and energy efficiency tools, partners, programs, and incentives are available for your community. Because that varies so much, this is hugely adaptable to wherever we would be for this. So as a part of this suite of services, we would definitely be doing research around, what utility program is there, what energy savings program is there, if any, who needs to be brought to the table. If there's a workshop, there absolutely needs to be a variety of partners around this to help really make that uptake of these programs simple for your business owners. Looking at practical ways to help small businesses save money, so the ways they can do it without having to apply for incentives, the small things that can make a big difference as a stepping stone. And also looking at green programs throughout the network. So there's a lot of innovation and ingenuity on Main Street, as you know, and so we're gathering examples of really good green programs, both rating programs for downtown businesses and other kinds of things like that could be adaptable and useful in your Main Street district. So again, we'll go through some of these slides here just kind of quickly. Again, this is kind of taking the research that's been done by other organizations to look at inherent energy efficiency, to offer some background education, that kind of thing, for a Main Street leader to understand these things, to be able to communicate it to their downtown businesses. So these are two really great reports if you haven't seen them. The Greenest Building is an overview that the National Trust Green Lab did with a bunch of different partners, leaders in the field, about quantifying the environmental value of building reuse. And then the other report that was kind of the Kickstarter for, not the Kickstarter money raising software, but the Kickstarter for the America Saves program, was this realizing the energy efficiency potential of small buildings, which looked at the small building universe in the country and how many small businesses there were, small buildings, and the potential for energy savings based on those numbers. So this is just one slide from that, but looking at basic energy efficiency outcomes with how much energy and money can be saved. So this is just an example here where, if a business owner went through with energy saving initiatives that were recommended by and funded by a utility or, energy efficiency program, this shows the annual energy saved and profit increase. So money that you're saving on energy that just goes back into your business and back into your community. And it showed that food service really has the highest potential to save money on utilities. That it seems like in food service especially, there's the most opportunity to save money there. But there's opportunity in every kind of business. This is just a pretty interesting finding that, wow, okay, if they commit to this, it's really worth the time in the interim to achieve the longer term profit. So again, this America Saves program that I mentioned, because we worked on this for 3 years, we do have a lot of learning from that we would love to apply to field services and really help push the idea of environmental sustainability in partnership with economic sustainability, cultural sustainability. These are all connected, but really looking at pretty practical ways for small businesses and nonprofits and anybody who uses a building basically downtown to save money. So taking the learnings from this big project and keeping applying it. So just this is a very quick example. There's a lot more to this research, but some of the key findings and key recommendations, we would go over that and what they mean in this webinar workshop. Offering some low-cost best practices. So these seem really simple, but if you think about what you do in your house, I know that after being a part of this program, it was like, wow, yeah, I do actually save a lot of money if I use a power strip or a energy-saving power strip or cleaning coils, etc., that kind of thing. Just these really basic pieces, and this is just one example, but we can go further in depth if that's of interest for your small business owners to do things where they don't really have to do anything other than add one step to their daily routine. We also look at a lot of different programs and incentives. So again, we look specifically at a local district, what's available in a local district or a state, but then also look at the applicability of different federal programs because it's a growing field, luckily, and there are new incentives and programs all the time. So really looking at those and how they might apply to your community or your state. So PACE is one of them, for example, Property Assessed Clean Energy. It's a hot new topic. It's a kind of a complicated funding mechanism, but it's really becoming more commonplace. There are a lot more examples, but this would be something we could talk through in the webinar workshop. Greenworks Lending, they are a company that we've been working with to help folks connect to PACE. So again, we can talk more about that in the workshop. And then things like Spark Fund and Kiva, which are basically funding for small projects. A lot of you have probably heard of them before, but these are microloan financing tools Spark Fund is more specifically around energy efficiency, but Kiva isn't necessarily just for energy efficiency. They do all kinds of stuff, and they're growing and partnering with a bunch of different organizations. So as their tool grows, their applicability to different kinds of project grows too. So part of this webinar/workshop series would really look at what kinds of funding mechanisms might be there to help the small business owner go from, a project idea to implementation. If there isn't, a utility funding, that kind of thing, what alternatives there might be. So all of these would be a part of that suite. This and more, again, looking through what your community might want to hear about, what they really want to focus on. The other piece that I didn't have a slide for was just looking through some of those green programs downtown. So if your community is interested in implementing a rating system or some kind of incentive to reward folks who are going through with energy efficiency implementation projects, that's another thing we can cover. Some ideas for that. So then our final theme is designing for people. So this is more of a survey and theoretical, not necessarily theoretical, but almost a different kind of 101, looking at expanding the universe of Main Street design. So exploring, again, a survey of topics, with placemaking being one of them. A lot of you are familiar with that, some of you aren't. So, of course, what we would deliver in your community would depend on that, but thinking through some things like placemaking, accessibility, equity, safety, all of these pieces need to be front and center of any kind of design project we take, because we're here for the people in our community to make sure everybody can access amenities and access downtown, both physically and mentally. Looking at methods of intentional public engagement in design processes. So looking at opportunities for new design projects that can spur an opportunity to work with the public, to get them involved, to get them plugged in and build a sense of ownership around any kind of design element downtown that you have an opportunity to build out. And then looking at what partners and resources are available to help you advocate for people-centered design. This is a good topic to think about partnerships, to think about who you can work with to really bolster your work, bolster their work together to to advocate for this concept of downtown is for everybody. Design can really be people-centered to make the sense of ownership a bigger deal in your main street. So again, kind of looking at a survey of topics here. If placemaking is a piece you want to pull into it, we have a lot of experience working with the Project for Public Spaces and doing different kinds of placemaking projects. So pulling placemaking into this workshop or webinar would be simple and fun. So this is just an example of one of those slides and kind of topics we can look into. ADA compliance, again, looking at equity, looking at safety, looking at how to make downtown for everybody, pulling in some concepts from ADA, what's out there as a resource for you to pull into any of your design-focused projects, and thinking through ADA as one of the primary pieces of that. And looking at other examples of organizations and projects and themes from across the country, and across the world too, that have really worked in terms of making downtown commercial districts more equitable and accessible, and making sure that everybody in your community is having a good time and feels engaged. 880 Cities is just one example of that. Looking at aging in place. So really thinking through what it would be like to be a person of a variety of ages in your downtown. What would it be like to be a kid? What kinds of design considerations at crosswalks, at parks, at really anywhere, and thinking through that from childhood through older adulthood. What kinds of things affect or can affect design-related projects, and how you can incorporate the needs of a few to really meet the needs of the whole. AARP Livable Community is another example. This is an organization we love partnering with. AARP has really an amazing suite of services, and an organization that has a lot of employees around the country. If you don't know your statewide AARP person, they'd be a great contact for you to have. And they have grants too, this AARP Community Challenge grant. I think it just passed, but again, they have this grant every year. But just thinking through partners that we can work with, that we can connect you with, that have really, really robust programs that are easily applicable to Main Street work. So pulling all of those pieces together, understanding that we're really a part of a much larger community than we think, especially when it comes to planning and when it comes to designing for a whole community. Clean and safe. We want anybody who comes to the commercial district to feel safe, to feel like they belong. So looking at some of the nuts and bolts pieces like the SEPTED checklist and how that can be incorporated into your design ethos and design programming. And again, thinking about making people feel welcome and making places feel accessible. So we can look at some hot topics like hostile architecture. And I say hot only because it can be controversial. It can be hard to understand some of the elements, but thinking through some of the ways design can repel people or make them not want to spend time in the commercial district, which is obviously not what we want. And then, of course, looking at some tools for community engagement. So a lot of you do a lot of this, do a great job at it, but in this topic, public engagement, both the outside community and then, of course, local government, all of those kinds of people, local leaders that should be brought to the table, some concepts on how to engage and plug in and make sure that everybody is at the table when you're thinking through design-related processes. And this webinar and workshop can really pull in some of these concepts if this is the focus you'd really like to get at in that area. Also looking at leaders and practitioners that we can partner with, that have resources to connect to, what you're looking at. There's a lot of really great work being done on a lot of these different kinds of topics that can really mesh well with Main Street work that you're already doing or can help spur it on. More and more, there are interesting funding mechanisms and places to go to for funding. So again, we can serve that role in kind of figuring that out for you or connecting you with some options. So again, just coming back, kind of rounding it out, pulling back to what the services look like. So again, we looked at these topics and the variety of different things that come under these topics that we can expand on and look at in the webinars and workshops. We will have, packaged 75-minute webinars that can be adapted depending on needs. And for this first go of the first launch of these new design services, these will be kind of the first pieces. But again, we'll be evaluating based on what's working, based on feedback. And again, there is this cost associated with these, but what we'd like to do from the center is understand what else we can offer above and beyond field services. So, as after you're hearing this, thinking through it, again, I'm a contact person around this. I'm very interested to know what the network needs and what they think about design and how it relates to the other elements in the Main Street approach. So even if these specific services aren't of interest right now for you and you want to talk about a different kind of design-related topic or look at a different design-related service, I'm your person. I'm more than happy to talk that through with you. Just a quick highlight. So as I said, these webinars and workshops, we're launching these first ones now and through the summer of 2019. So think through if that's of interest to you. We'll obviously be offering them for as long as we're around. So they won't stop in the summer or anything like that, but the first ones that we're going to be doing, in addition to the ones we've already done, will be, spring, summer. So getting that launched. We are also working with the Project for Public Spaces to put out a transportation toolkit, which will be a handbook, an online resource library, and a webinar series. And that should launch in late summer of 2019. Originally, we were going for May 2019, but the handbook is bigger than we were anticipating, which is great, but it's taking a little bit more time. So that's another service and resource we'll be offering. And then if you're interested for a little deeper engagement, our Main Street America Institute will be doing the Advanced Principles of Quality Design course starting on Tuesday, the 14th. If you're interested at all in taking that course, you can reach out to us via the Main Street America Institute email there. Kelly Hummerkhauser leads that, and if you haven't met her, she's fantastic. Always good to get in touch with her, but that's another service we're putting out there for folks. So this is my contact information. Again, if you are interested in any of these, I'm your person. If you're interested in talking through any other design-related Main Street topics or anything like that, please feel free to reach out to me directly. I am going to open up the question box to start answering these because I can switch it over to our Q&A. But again, feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you to talk through some of this. So let me get to the top of this thing. Okay, first question. It's about the design handbook. Yes, Debbie, I can send that to you directly and also send you the website list, because along with the handbook, the actual PDF, we build out a online resource library of resources that we connect to in the handbook that you can look at for more information about different topics. And while you're there, when you look at it, if you are interested in, or if you have resources that you've seen that are like, wow, this would be really good to connect people to, please feel free to send them over to us. We can upload those onto that web page because we want to make sure that's growing and expanding and live for different kinds of resources and reports and, all kinds of things that you guys use in the field. Okay, next question. Are these services available only to Main Street organization or any city or town? These services are available to really any community. We primarily work in our Main Street network, but yes, for these first webinars, they're open to any community, because we also want to spread the word about Main Street and bring more people into the fold. So even if you're not a Main Street member now, we're happy to offer services and then try to link you into the network. Okay. Can you share the PowerPoint with us or send it? Yes, we can. So the PowerPoint link, I'm going to ask our comms team to put it out in the Main Street News that comes out Thursday or Friday. If you don't get that, please feel free to reach out to me, and I can send you the link directly. But we'll make sure it's in the newsletter as well, which you can, I think, forward if you wanted to share it with anybody as well. But again, if you're having any problems accessing it, just let me know. Waiting a sec in case anybody else has a question. I see a hand was raised. Okay, not sure what that was about, but I'll hang on if anybody else has any other questions. Again, you can feel free to reach out to me directly too. Okay, it doesn't look like any are coming in. No problem. Thank you all for being on the line with us. We were really thrilled to see how many people were interested in hearing this preview. So I'm really glad about that. I hope that means that we'll have some interaction around this topic as we launch these, and then as we're growing the design focused services. So again, thank you for your time. And I hope to hear from you, and we'll make sure this recording is in Main Street News. But thanks again, everybody. Hope you have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.